Hi there, and welcome back to our coffee break conversations. We have decided to do these once a week to capture some of what God is up to in the midst of this season. We're aware that there's challenges and there's joys, but we do know that God doesn't stop working. So we're really grateful for those who've been involved so far. Last week we had some volunteer youth leaders. The week before we had some of our employed youth and children's workers. And today we've got some church leaders with us, and we're really grateful, guys, for you giving of your time today. Thank you. I'll do some quick introductions and then we'll jump in because we're trying to keep this coffee break length. So you have time to drink your coffee and listen and engage. So let me introduce everybody. We've got Cheryl Patterson. Cheryl, if you give a wee wave so that it does also say on the screen, but a wee wave is always nice. Cheryl is the minister at Glenburn Methodist in Belfast. So thank you, Cheryl, for being with us today. And we've got Andy Witherall, and he is the lay worker in Moy Methodist. And that is near Dungannon. And then we've got Alison Gallagher, and Alison lives, I'm maybe a little biased because I used to live near here in one of the loveliest parts of the country, up in County Donegal, and is responsible for Drummond and White Castle churches up there. So we're really glad to have you all with us today, and we know that you are responding and engaging with children and families at this time, as well as many other things, but our focus today will be thinking through how this is impacting children and families. But can we just start with, how are you doing in this season? How are you finding it? I think that's Cheryl first. No, Andy first.
Sorry, I was just unmuting myself there.
No worries, don't worry.
We're finding it challenging, but we're also getting into a flow. I think the first 3 weeks was getting used to the technology side of things. Partly for myself, I had to learn how to use Zoom, and it was a whole learning curve. There's one thing that I was doing wrong, and it meant that the first 2 weeks were very, very interesting in terms of our meetings. And that phrase that you hear now bandied around, the new normal. We want to try and get into some kind of normality, some kind of momentum, even if that's very different from what we're used to meeting up together as a congregation. But we find that we're getting into the flow of things a little bit on a Sunday and midweek. And one of the things that we want to do now is to try to say, well, now that we've got the sort of the bare bones in place, how do we now build on that? So we're not just trying to keep church afloat for the foreseeable future. We want to be engaging as a church should, and fulfilling all the functions that a church should. So we're finding our way forward.
Good. It does take time, doesn't it, just to get our heads around this, and I feel like we've done the same. We responded and then we're learning as we go, aren't we? Hugely. Yeah. What about the rest of you? How have you found it so far?
Well, certainly the technology side of it is a bit challenging. I'm not a natural techie, but once I discovered Zoom, that was brilliant. The first few weeks I was doing things like recording myself to put up for people to watch later. And I didn't like that because I couldn't see or engage with people. So the beauty of Zoom is that you can see everyone that you're with. They can talk, you can talk, and you can engage. So I found that exciting once I got hold of Zoom. So I think for me, this has been quite an energizing season, and I've seen a lot of opportunities in it. And my main focus has been on connection. And so it's been about having the time to really do that, to focus on what I think ministry is really all about, which is engaging with people to help them engage more with God. And there's been a lot more opportunity to focus on that because a lot of other things like meetings have just gone by the way. Yay.
I know. We all are quite happy. I'm looking at all the faces.
All those committees and things like that. So for me, I've actually found it quite energizing and just been excited to see the opportunities to really connect.
Yeah, brilliant. Isn't it interesting that the benefits as well in the middle of this, as well as the hard stuff? And I think we've some lessons for the future in that as well, haven't we? Some really interesting lessons for the future. Cheryl, how are you finding it?
Well, I suppose similar to what Andy and Alison have said, there's challenges with relation to ministry, and learning all the different tech has certainly been a steep learning curve over the past few weeks. Personally, I think it's been a real mixture of, some days I feel great and I can see the opportunities that this is given, and there's maybe a bit of additional time to rest and sit and think that you wouldn't normally find in the busyness of everyday life. But then there's other days that it's actually quite a challenge and it's quite a struggle, and I'm really aware of living on my own and not having any company in the house, and really missing seeing friends and family and the people that give me life. And so on some days it has both those things, it maybe has it starts off great and then halfway through you think, oh, what's going on? And then maybe it finishes great, and it is this real up and down, I suppose, of struggle and challenge in the midst of it all.
I think I've been really interested as I've been talking to people. I don't know how you guys have found this, but there's been times where there's been like a real kind of everybody's hitting a wall in the same week, and then we come back up again, and there's seasons in this, and I must admit some days are really light, and then other days you're like, whew, and we're still here, and that's part of it. And if we're feeling that, so are our children and our families, aren't they? And so that multiplies out, and that leads, I suppose, on to the next one. Cheryl, how do you think this is impacting the families and the children that you serve through your church?
I think I'm finding there's a couple of different answers to that in the families that I'm doing with. For some, this real joy, and they're to have proper family time together. Yeah. And do things together that they wouldn't normally have the opportunity to do. The busyness of activities, sport, running here, there, and everywhere. And so there's been really joyful family times. But for others, it's been a real challenge, especially with homeschooling, for parents that are trying to support children through their schoolwork that they're struggling to understand, never mind teach their children. And also, they're trying to work at home for some of them as well. So it's trying to balance working from home in their own jobs, supporting their children, keeping a bit of a rhythm and a routine for children who are missing their friends, missing the activities of school, missing their sports and their dancing. And so there's a real bundle of emotion there too, and stress and joy. So I think families go through that wave as well of some days it's fabulous and they manage really well. Other days it's like, let's rub this out and start again tomorrow.
I've seen a lot of that on Facebook. I'm just starting again tomorrow.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What about for the rest of you? How are you experiencing this impact the families and children that you're serving?
Very much the same as Cheryl, quite mixed. For some families, it is a welcome break from all the rush around ferrying children here, there, and everywhere. But the challenge of homeschooling, quite a few of our parents said that up until the Easter holidays, it was fine. I think it was partly the novelty of it all. And then the children were on holiday, but it was then when they had to still have them at home, but try to settle them back into school routine, with the younger ones trying to get them to be willing to sit down and focus, especially because most of our kids are farming kids, and so they just love to be outdoors and running around and playing around. And all of a sudden, after 2 weeks of that, they were having to sit at home and do some schoolwork. So that's been a challenge for parents, I think, and some have probably taken to that a little bit more easily than others, especially the parents of older children. It's a lot more challenging to help them with their schoolwork.
Absolutely.
So that's been the main challenge. And they've said themselves they miss seeing their friends, which is why things on Zoom have been great, because then they can get to see each other and talk to each other. And they miss seeing their families, because the family network here, they all live very close geographically and they can't see each other. And so one little boy said he's saving up lots of hugs for his granda. And
yeah. And that's that is the really tough part, is that family relationships, and maybe we're all realizing how significant, like we knew family relationships were significant, but just how important the extended family is in our culture still. I certainly have a little girl who's really missing her nannies and grandas. It's hard, it's really hard. Andy, what about you? Is it a similar experience? Is there anything to add to that?
Yeah, very similar. And that tension between the increased family time on the one hand, but the pressures that come with work, and with socializing young people. There's one or two, and I'd include my own boy in this, who's just 18 months, who's a lot quieter than he was 3 months ago. He would have engaged well with people. He sees his aunts and uncles occasionally. They come to the front of the garden there, but he seems to engage less with people. And another thing that has come back to me from a couple of families is a sense of anxiety, wanting to protect their family, and especially their children. And there's been a couple of babies that have been born into the either the pandemic or not too long before that. And so there's obviously anxiety there, that we want our children to be safe, and they are vulnerable people. So there's that side of things as well that is difficult.
Yeah, and I think I'm hearing a little bit of worry for what the next number of months look like, not just worry for today, isn't it? It's, will we still be homeschooling in September? What if we're doing partly homeschooling and part not? What do we do about work? There's so many unknowns, and I think it's quite hard to live at that level of unknown, isn't it, for a long time, and sustain that for families. I think, so absolutely, I share that kind of joy. There's definite joy, like we sit around a table together of an evening now for a dinner, which we didn't do because people would have been home at different times. So there's definite blessings, but there's hard stuff to work with. How is it impacting how we do ministry, how we respond to some of those things for our families and children? How has that changed how we do ministry? I think, Alison, you're going to kick us off with this one.
Yeah, well, I suppose the main change is that it's having to largely be done through technology. My big concern was that initially we all seemed to be doing lots of things for the adults. First of all, I was doing sort of recorded services, short services. Then I started Sunday morning Zoom services. But I was very conscious of how do we engage the children in all of that. And yes, they come to service, but they're no longer having Sunday school. We do a lot of work in primary schools. So the children in our two congregations are used to seeing me most weeks coming into the school. Yep. And particularly because of the pressures on parents for homeschool, I wanted to kind of relieve a bit of that pressure and think, how can we keep the children engaging with God and engaging with the family of God? So that was my sort of big concern. And so the way that's impacted things is it made me think, well, what can I do so that I can keep the children engaged, help the parents with their discipling of their children when they've already got extra schooling and that side of things on their plates. So for me, I started doing Messy Church on Zoom. We've had a Messy Church going in our church for about 4 years now. It's largely, it's not Messy Church in its full, as it should be fully. It's not all ages. It's really been a focus on the young families. Yep. So it's the parents with young children that come along to that. And so I wanted to think, well, what could we still do for them? So we decided we'd try Messy Church on Zoom. And whereas Messy Church before used to be every 2 months, we every 2 weeks.
Oh, wow. Good on you.
And it's going great. The kids are loving it. There's real enthusiasm, and we're finding lots of different ways to connect them. So I think that's been the biggest impact. How could I still, through technology, engage the families and keep them engaged with God and engaging with one another as the body of Christ, so that we keep that sense of connection and in actual fact strengthen that sense of connection, so that when we're able to gather physically, we feel that we've continued to grow together with each other and grow together with God. So
yeah. No, I have a million questions about how on earth does Messy Church work online, and we may come back to that if we've time for the technicalities of it. But I think it's really interesting, isn't it? And that keeping that connection going. And I do think some connections will deepen over this time because we're doing it in a slightly more intentional way, maybe even than we have done before.
Yeah.
So that's so encouraging, Alison, just to hear that. And I'm sure for families and children, that's really significant that they've got something like that to plug into every couple of weeks. So I will have more questions for you in a moment, but we'll keep going around everyone else and then we'll come back because that's I know people out there will have questions about the how of the Messy Church. Anyone else want to pop in with what they're doing at the minute to serve children or families?
I suppose from the beginning, like Alison, we were trying to figure out how do we keep connections with families, and particularly with children that would be there on Sunday mornings and would be part of our worship life on Sundays. And so we made sure that when we were putting resources up for the adults, that we were also putting resources up for the children as well. So every Sunday morning we put up links for I guess Sunday school links, we call our Sunday school jigsaw, for the kids could go and parents, and really it's a collection of links to other things, resources that are available online, but we tried to tie them in with the material that we were doing in the services and in the sermons so that it would encourage families to have conversations around it, and that the children would understand what the adults have done, and the adults would then be more informed to help and support the children with their teaching. So largely we've kept that connected. We've done a few family services where we've asked parents to video the children doing readings and prayers and doing action songs, and then we put that together for a service. And actually they're our best viewed services because people I'll not take it personally, but people love to see the children, and it does just bring such joy and such life to see that the children are still involved. I'm so thankful that we have a bunch of children who are happy to do that, and they love to take part. And I didn't want that to be lost in this season, and them to get out of the way of being part of worship. So thankful to the parents as well for taking the time to video them and send them in. And as well as that, we do a weekly challenge. So two of our jigsaw leaders, which I'm so thankful for, Hannah and Rebecca Rogers, they do a challenge every Monday where they set a challenge, but it's just something fun. So sometimes it's obstacle courses, scavenger hunt, paint a picture. We call it Spreading Joy with Jigsaw, because we want the activities to be about spreading joy, making people laugh, just changing the week. And so in the busyness of homeschooling, that there would be something fun for them to do, and then they post their videos for everybody in church to see, which has been really, really lovely. And it's been great just to see, so the children know that they're not forgotten, but also so that the wider church family can continue to see that those children are doing well and growing well and still being part of our worship together in all the different ways. So it's been a good connection. And I know our organisations, I should say, are doing a lot of stuff as well to keep connecting in. The table tennis and GB have made little videos of the young people and sent in and collated them all together, and it's all of it just helps people to see joy in the midst of this season. If they're having a hard day, it just brightens the day to see the kids, because they're so full of life and so full of energy. So it's been lovely to keep up that connection, and it's so vital for our churches to not forget that there are children and there are young people that we still need to engage with.
I love that, and I've loved seeing the increased participation actually in our Sunday worship, and I think we're probably thinking that through a wee bit more because we're doing it online, and it's brilliant, and I think I've loved seeing the kids who just are genuinely loving being part of it as well. It's so good for the kids to be we matter enough to be asked to do this, and it's so encouraging. I love the challenges idea. That's brilliant. I would imagine there's people out there going, "Ooh, that's a good idea." That's part of this is the ideas for that. Yeah, and it's that value piece, isn't it? Going, when we do this, we say we value you. You're part of our church family, and that they've got something to offer the adults as well in terms of adding some joy to their week, which is great. Andy, what about you guys? What have you guys been up to? How's it changed? How you do ministry?
Yeah, I think similar to what Alison said, the feeling at the very beginning was the fact that we're doing a lot here for the adults, and the young people could very easily miss out because of that. We are in a church that has a long-standing children's ministry, but at the moment the numbers are down with the young people, and the age range is wide as well, which presents a whole other challenge to us. Now we want to obviously continue connecting with those children that we do have, but it's also a fantastic opportunity, we pray, to get to know more. And for parents to pass on Facebook links or WhatsApp messages or Zoom invitations to other people. We've been able to think outside the box a little bit in terms of how we engage. So 2 weeks ago, we did a Bible scavenger hunt, where the young people would come along and they would be given a Bible verse, and it was a race to look up the Bible verse, find a particular household object which is within that Bible verse, and then they had to scatter, and it was the first one back with the object, which was great fun, utter chaos. But it was good fun, and the young people loved it, and we got a good number, some of whom we may not see regularly. So that was really, really good. And we're now planning to do something every 2 weeks. This event that we're calling Kids Connect. I actually had a very good conversation with Alison a few weeks ago, and she gave me 1 or 2 ideas which we're now moulding into something new. So that's been very good. And we had just started, before the lockdown began, a family night, which was going to be once a month, and it was going to be quizzes and games and competitive activities and things like that. And so the question was, well, how can we emulate this over Zoom? And we had one. It's always the first of the month, so we had one 3 weeks ago now, which went well. But we want to try and build on this and make it more and more family friendly. So it's not just the children that are receiving, but whole families, hopefully doing things together.
Which is amazing. And I think some of the byproducts of this are very interesting. So sometimes when we're aiming something at the children, the parents are in the background. So if the parents aren't connected to church, they're getting to hear some of that. So there's some real missional opportunities in this. But also, we've been talking about intergenerational church for a long time, and this is forcing us to think it through in a different way, isn't it? And I do think we've done some thinking around it, but I think some of it, now if we want to connect with a kid, we have to connect with the family because of the online safety issues. And so it's given us opportunities. It's so encouraging just to hear the creativity. That's what we've been really struck by, is just the creativity that is going on out there or in churches. And we wanted to celebrate that a wee bit. That was part of what we wanted to do in this, and it's so encouraging. And even to be able to ask questions of one another around how things are working is really important too. I know that some of you listening may be like, how do I do a messy church online? And I'm sure Alison would be willing to answer some questions if you have some specifics or any of the other things that people are talking about. I'm sure we could get some more information for you. So if there's something you've heard today, you're like, oh, that sounds great. We can work out how to get some information to you around that. What are we sensing that God is up to in this time? What do you think he's doing in the midst of it all? I think, Andy, you were going to start us off with this one. Oh, we've lost you. You're on mute. There we go.
There we are. I think we can say that God is for our church giving us new opportunities, getting us out of maybe routines that we might find ourselves in. Ways of doing things that are tried and tested, but forcing us to push things forward in a new way, and ways in which may not be just for this season that we're in. In a year's time, hopefully we'll be back to some kind of normality, whatever that's going to look like. But what we're learning now, we would like to impact what we're going to be doing in a year's time. So I think there's a lot of stretching going on for the long term, giving us new ways to connect through an online format, or even new ideas to do when we're sort of back to normal. And as has been said, not just connecting with the young people, but thinking about how we do things together as family is very, very important. And the traditional model is adults in the main church, children in the side room, and it's not there's anything wrong necessarily with that, but isn't it great to think how we can do ministry together and have these events where we're all in it together, learning together, praising together, and I think God's teaching us a little bit about how we can be doing that.
Yeah, it's a real picture of God's kingdom, isn't it? When you at all those ages experiencing God together and learning together, absolutely. Yeah. Cheryl Nelson, what are you sensing God's up to?
Well, for me, the scripture that I kept getting in the beginning was "Be still and know that I am God." And I think it's very much a season for us to focus on what really matters, to keep our priority on God, and to focus on what helps us connect better with God and what helps the people that we serve connect better with God. Many years ago, I was on a mission team in West Africa, and the scripture that I've read many times, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. I was reading that in my morning devotions one day, and it hit me afresh because I was in a situation where I was stripped of all the normal comforts of life over here. Everything was reduced very much to the basics. And all of a sudden I thought, all that really matters is loving God and loving people. And in a sense, that's what this season is just reminding us of. It's just putting that back to the front, that so many of the things that we consider important in life don't really matter. That it's God and people and them. Yeah, I think that's a lot of what this season is about, getting us to get our priorities straight.
And in the midst of that, as we get our priorities straight, there's such an opportunity in terms of, I just love that stuff around strengthening relationships with others in that, and that is so encouraging. Yeah, amazing. That be still verse has been one of mine over the last few weeks too, just because I'm not very good at being still. Still's not really me, so God's been teaching me that one, definitely. Cheryl, what about you?
I've been thinking about this question, and I suppose I struggle to answer it a little bit concisely, because I think partly I want to say, well, God is doing what God has always been doing, in that God has always been at work around us, and God has always been present and is always working at showing his love and revealing his kingdom to people, and so this is I guess a season where that work of God is being shown to us maybe in a slightly different through a different lens, because it's a lens where we're restricted and where things of normality don't seem normal anymore. And so when I think of this question, I think about, well, where do I see God at work in the midst of this? And I definitely see God in the renewed community spirit that we've seen, and in the sense of thankfulness and appreciation that has been developed throughout this season. And I do think that there's a challenge within that for us to take that further and to look at the things that we're thankful for, and why are we thankful for them, and where do they come from, and to really find God at the root of all of those things, and to realize that God's presence is interweaved through everything and every place, every person, and I think we've maybe lost sight of seeing that because we've got so much, we don't see God as clearly, and perhaps this has shown us a way to see God a little bit more clearly. So I definitely see God in that renewed community spirit, and maybe in the sense of, well, for me, I suppose there's a sense of rest. I know that's not been the experience for everyone, because for some people they're busier and they're still out working and they're doing really long shifts, and this season is actually hectic and it's not restful at all. So I'm cautious of saying rest, because I know that's my experience and not everybody's. But I do think that God is trying to say, what is important, what matters most, what are the things that we've built around ourselves that we can strip away because they're non-essentials. And actually in the stripping away of those things, finding God at the root of it and the steadiness of it. And I think throughout all of this, the only thing that steadies my heart in the midst of the panic is to realize that God is good and God is with us and God is still faithful and He is the same. He is the constant. And so be steady in that, and whatever may come will come, and God will still be in it. And whatever this looks like when we come out of restriction and isolation, well, God's still going to be good, and God's still going to be faithful, and God's still going to be at work. So that's where we anchor ourselves, and the rest can come and go as it wishes, as long as that's where we're anchored, because everything will be possible. It may take time, but it will be possible because He is in the foundation of it all.
Such an important reminder that God's got it, you know, and He walks ahead of us, and He knows what comes down the line. We've been listening to some stories through our Take Heart series from teenagers and young adults, and there's been a real sense of that coming through, that whole having to really trust and really depend on God in this, and it's upped our dependence, hasn't it? And it's upped our trust. And that's what hard stuff does. But actually, how do we take some of that forward is really interesting questions as we move into the next little phase. And at times I struggle because I have more questions than answers. But I know that I have a God who understands that and understands that about me. Guys, thank you. It's been so we're having a slightly longer coffee break today because I think we could talk on. So we could. So as much as I'd like to delve into a few other things, for people's sake listening, I'm going to pause for now. But thank you for sharing your heart today and for sharing some of your experience. And if any of you who are listening do have any questions, please fire them in either on Facebook or you can email IMYC and we'll make sure they get to the right people. But we're just so grateful that God is at work and He is allowing us to be part of this response as we serve children and young people. And thank you for how you're doing that and for how you're prioritising children and young people in your church communities. Thanks. Bye-bye.